Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, September 25th at 7:02 p.m. We have a series of committee meetings tonight, the first one of which will be Planning and Development, and that is chaired by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. Tonight, to start off, we have a presentation from Sol, Jim Bloom, and on a proposed project on Madison Avenue and the corner of Madison and East State Street, which many of probably remember other projects coming forward. So this is the new project concept.
Okay, we don't have a really exciting presentation. We just were told to come here after the Planning Commission. But I'll give you a brief overview of what our plan is. I'm Jim Bloom from Diversified Properties. My business partner, John Soul. We own this property on the corner of Madison and East State Street, the site of the former Athens flower shop. Our company has owned the property for 12 years. I won't go through the entire sordid history, but during that time period, we've had a number of different development concepts which for one reason or the other we had determined were not appropriate to move forward with. And they ranged from, my goodness, the very first was a 24-unit apartment building with an underground parking garage, to a number of a densely populated attached single-family housing concept, which we had experience with elsewhere in Athens to some degree of success. And for one reason or the other, the site is incredibly challenging in terms of its topography, in terms of an existing ingress and egress easement that circulates through the heart of the property and also gives access to 4 additional properties in ownership. There is a single-family residence and 3 non-owner occupied residences, which also have access, ingress, and egress through the existing easement that I'm discussing. After a fair amount of deliberation in our office, we decided to take another close look at it. We've had a fair amount of interest recently, really within the last couple of years, of people looking, and this has an impact based on our real estate brokerage as well, people looking for residential locations to construct single-family homes in the city of Athens, which I am sure you are all well aware are incredibly hard to find. So part of the concept that we have here, and I'll just be very specific, is taking the existing garage that is right there on the corner. That's going to be removed, replaced with a structure which will house 2 two-bedroom apartment units. There will be 4 parking spaces, 1 for each tenant, built below the building. So they'll pull in there and they'll live there. That footprint of that building will be virtually the same as the existing structure that exists now. But there is an effort to try to push that a little deeper into the hill, which when the garage comes out, it'll be critical that we get that immediately retained with a significant retaining wall to keep that hillside. The existing flower shop will be retrofitted to house 2 more bedroom apartment units each. We will use the majority of the foundation and first floor of the existing flower shop as the basis for the construction. Obviously, the greenhouse portion that exists now will have to be removed. And the parking for that will be, there's a peninsula. John, did you give them the map? Okay. Oh, very good. The peninsula, where there's an additional area for adequate parking for each of the tenants that will go into the flower shop project. Per the request of the Planning Commission, about half, if not 60% of that peninsula will be dedicated to green space, so no further development will take place in that area. We are hoping to also retain the existing parking, which is along Madison, which will serve as guest parking or overflow parking as well. The final portion of the development will be 2 single-family lots, which are here referred to as Parcel A and Parcel B. We've shown you a suggested footprint of what a single-family home sitting on that lot would look like. One of the reasons we were set to go to planning earlier this season, and on advice of our legal counsel, we reviewed our easement, which is of record, once again before we went forward to make sure that it was rock solid, and we met with the owner of the adjacent property that in fact offers that easement to us. And in conjunction with this development, our counsel has indicated there could have been some, I'm going to use his words, dilution of that easement when that easement goes to the current 1-acre parcel. He said once you begin to subdivide, there could be a case for that easement not having the same magnitude that it would have if it was not attached directly to each parcel. We've had that conversation with the adjacent property owner. He's aware of what we're doing. He is behind us as far as whatever we need to do. When, optimistically, we have an approved final plat, we will have specifically that easement tied to Parcel A and to Parcel B as well. So we firmed that up, and that's when we came back to the Planning Commission. It is a unique parcel. It requires some out-of-the-box thinking in terms of placing structures. We have gone through ourselves and shared with the code officer the entire table of bulk controls just to see what that's really going to mean, because our understanding is even with approval, the final act will be the Zoning Board of Appeals, since we will be rezoning the property. And it's actually quite modest. We actually have four changes out of the bulk controls that we'll probably ask for. And that is to allow us, specifically on the single-family properties, which are C and D, to be able to get a little closer to the road, hopefully 20 feet instead of 25, which allows us to take advantage of a little more of the flat ground that exists. Utility-wise, we've done our work there. The city has actually, as you know, done work on the water line during this time period, and we have new water line that's come up the street, which we will access for parcels A and B. We will need to to go down to East State and pick up the sewer, and we'll be bringing new sewer line up for those front units as well, even though they're currently connected to the sewer. It's old, so we're going to put new in there. That's really pretty much most of it. I think it's important to at least mention, because it is a little confusing, Parcel D, which is the flower shop, will be tied to this peninsula parcel in perpetuity by language in both deeds, so that that parcel on the peninsula, in fact, in perpetuity, will provide the parking for the apartment in D. You know, the other way we could have handled that was to have a crazy sliver of property running from the flower shop all the way up and connecting to that. But we think this is a more appropriate solution, which will limit anything ever happening to that other parcel other than being used for the parking and dedicated to the green space. That's sort of the long and short of it. If you have questions, we're happy to try to respond.
Well, I think specifically what council will be looking at is that you are going to subdivide the property.
Correct.
And did you go to Planning Commission? I know that you went with one plat, and then are you going to go through with the new plat that you have now?
If so directed.
Okay.
Yeah, the direction given from our last meeting with planning was,
Right.
this was our next stop.
Right. Well, for us to approve on plats, we would have to, if the Planning Commission, if we do not get a recommendation from the Planning Commission, for whatever reason, then 3/4 of the council has to approve, as opposed to just a majority. So council can approve things without Planning Commission's stamp. So I don't know if Lisa had discussed that with you or Rick Soros. So because the one plat that you have put in front of the Planning Commission is a little different than the one that you're presenting by lines, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So that's just something that council should be, aware, and you should be aware. Okay.
Right. In other words, adjusting the lines,
Yeah.
The adjustments that took place.
Right. And that's considered a new plat. So.
Okay.
Okay. So that's one thing that would be before. Either you would go through the Planning Commission, and they would give us a recommendation.
Again.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's a new plat because you changed it. Or you bring it to the planning, you could bring it to us. And we would have to approve of it by a majority of 6.
Okay.
So that's 2 options. Personally, I think you should probably go through the Planning Commission because that's the normal way. I don't know time-wise. And then you were going to ask for a zoning change?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the zoning change in this area, if you look at it's all B1, which is business. And businesses require to have a business in the bottom, and you can have apartments on the top. So that's the change that you want. From B1, you want to change it into 2 R1 parcels and then an R3 parcel.
2 R3 parcels.
2 R3 parcels for the 2
right.
apartments.
And excuse me for interrupting, what would we call the zoning on the peninsula where it's parking?
Open space.
Pardon me?
Open space.
Okay.
So
that's fine. Zoned
yeah.
open space?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the R1 parking. So basically what you're asking for is a change from B
Correct.
to an R. And, we went back and looked at the comprehensive plan for, the Near East neighborhood. And this does go in line with the plan, the comprehensive plan, because it identifies opportunities to increase residential areas.
Okay.
And we know as council that we have, there is a need for R1. And so you are producing a mixed use, a mixed use of property here. So looking back at the comprehensive plan, it does fall in line with some of the goals and objectives for the Near East neighborhood. So the zoning change will have to go through a regular process, and that will have to go through a public hearing.
Question.
Yeah.
Just trying to stay in the process.
Mm-hmm.
So A, possibly take what we'll call the amended plat back to planning.
Get it approved.
They approve.
Bring it here.
Back to the committee, or directly to council for a reading?
I would think that you'd probably be able to go to council. Yeah. So because we've already talked about it.
Okay.
Okay. So that would come forward with the commission's approval.
Okay.
And then that would go through 3 readings. And the zoning...
Public comment after that, or
No,
after zoning?
The zoning would only be the required comment.
Okay.
So it has to have a public hearing.
Prior to zoning?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we can
Need
go...
a playbook for that.
Well, you can go to the zoning changes, the ordinance for zoning changes can go at the same time as the public hearing.
Okay.
So as long as it takes place during that process.
Okay.
So like annexing, you have to have multiple public hearings. So it's not as long.
Not asking for that.
Yeah. So that's kind of the game plan on
Okay.
council's level.
Okay.
So does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
I have a comment. So I actually watched this planning commission, and a lot of these things were discussed, and we do have several documents here from the planning commission. I'm not thinking that the changes are very significant,
It was...
except for the zoning. Now that's a huge piece right there.
Yeah.
But I mean, if council could at least discuss moving forward, and we have 2 other members here of the planning commission sitting here, to at least do this piece if council was okay with that.
Yeah.
And hear that next week. I know you want to send it back to the planning commission.
Well, I mean, there's. I think that Lisa's suggested going through
the law director.
Yes, the law director. But she said either way is okay, but there is a requirement if we do not have a planning commission recommendation that it would have to be passed in council by 6 out of 7 members. And if there was a member not there,
Sure.
and so it's just there is that extra burden that we have to go through if you don't go through the planning commission.
When's the next planning commission?
When's the next planning commission meeting?
October 6th.
So-
Is that a Thursday? And we didn't have any cases until then. I'm just curious, may I ask a question? I'm being told tonight that you have a new plat.
Well,
Did it
we moved
incorporate-
the
was it a-
property line 5 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just, my question was whether or not it incorporated the different outline recommendations, and that's what made it new, but it does not.
John, why don't you give her a copy of that?
Okay.
So,
Right.
One
So-
of the things we changed was that you recommended a green space.
Correct, that's what I
That's
meant.
what we
Right.
did.
Okay. I mean, that's one thing about planning
It's
recommendations
so minor,
with.
well,
but it is changed.
Right. Well, the thing
Well-
is that with planning recommendations, they do come with recommendations to the developer about maybe you need to do this, this, and this.
Right.
And we know that they have been looked at by the planning commission. However, the 2 plats that you have presented are almost identical. And so I would be comfortable bringing it forward to the council as long as you realize that that needs to have a supermajority to pass.
and that's at the third reading? Yeah, and let me make the following comment, that those changes were made as a result of the discussion with the planning commission when actually I asked the planning commission if they would endorse I don't know what that means, the project as to, for the zoning board of appeals to consider an endorsement. apparently, once it's here, it is an endorsement that it's come through the planning commission.
Yeah, a recommendation.
Yeah, it's a
Right,
recommendation.
right.
So as a result of that, the changes we made, and they're relatively minor, but they were done because we began looking at this with the thought of what can we do to not require any specific variances to build.
Okay.
So that's why you've got that drawing where things are placed, because we're attempting to have the least amount of variances required.
Right.
So that's where that came from.
Okay.
Just that was the change.
Steve?
I was away in DC during the planning commission meeting, and I'm not buying it out on this one, but what I do know, and so the lot lines did move slightly.
One moved 5 feet one way to the other, and the other one we kind of brought right across where the lower unit is, to give that the 7,000 square feet, the R3. It was a matter of like a few hundred square feet,
Yeah,
just to try to comply with those bulk controls when we get there.
but with that, it should have come back, or should come back to the planning commission. I mean, that's just the rules of planning commission, to where you're starting to change lot lines.
Sure.
It would come back to us, even if it was a recommendation that was made to the planning commission to look at what has happened, or if they've changed, then we make a determination, and then it rolls forward. I think that's basically the cleaner way to do it. It does.
We
it
don't
does
really
move
have
you
a
on
problem
to-
with that. If that's what has to happen, we'll.
I mean, it's a safer method, to tell
Yeah,
you
we
the
don't
truth.
really want to get to
You
the
know.
third reading,
And have 2 people gone.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
You know.
Okay.
So you have that's a suggested timeline.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, they developed a timeline here for the 2 different ways. So,
This is for the rezoning.
oh, the rezoning. Okay.
Because they're different.
They're different.
Right,
So,
we have a timeline as of coming into the meeting, but I am assuming that timeline will change.
Yeah, really.
we'll give you these. So, I mean, I think what the mayor is saying also is, from a purely kind of process-oriented way that, and the planning commission is meeting next week. It's not like they only meet quarterly, so that's one thing.
They're
Next
meeting
week.
next Thursday?
Next Thursday.
We're fine.
Yeah, we're fine with that. We'll do it that way. I think it's,
How do we get on the agenda? Can we
Contact code stories.
we will do that?
we're in
I'm sure you
constant
have them on
contact.
speed dial.
We're in constant contact with Rick. We'll do that.
So that has to be
Can I ask?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a couple comments about the project.
Please
First of
do.
all, for anybody who doesn't know that piece of property, it's very steep. And I assume you've done the appropriate things for drilling and slippage and all that kind of thing.
We have a initial report right after we bought the property, before we even entered into the very first plan. We had a full soil exam, and actually it's somewhere in the archives. So we had done that originally when
Okay.
we submitted our very first plan.
Right, and that plan
So-
was approved.
That was
Right.
approved, but
Yeah.
that went through the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Yeah.
So it was a little different process.
Right.
But we did do that because,
And there are substantial retaining walls there already. I'm thinking of the parking along Madison, and then, that are already there that, in terms of a development, I assume you're trying to leave those as best you can to not disturb the
right.
situation.
Plus the Planning Commission was outspoken in their concern about penetrating that wall from Madison.
Right.
And the condition was that we have no desire to do that.
So one of my other questions is, you're going to develop the apartments, obviously, for income, and then everything's for income, but the 2 properties in the back, higher up the hill,
The two
are-
resident,
2
single family,
residences are to be sold,
designed and built.
designed, and built?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
most likely, this will be our company designing a property, building it, and
Selling it, okay. So do you know which way you're doing it? Are you building the apartments first and then? Do you have an idea on that? I'm just wondering, 'cause,
Sure.
sometimes developments kind of sputter out midway
Yeah,
through, and so.
John can address that, because we just talked about that
We'll probably
today.
try to
You have to stand up for the TV land people.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think our intention is to work on the flower shop and the removal of the garage and clean up the lower area, get that all put together, and then move with the 2 building lots. Once again, our other plans that were approved were a lot denser.
Right.
This is a real toned-down plan, which I think is, going to fit nicely into the area. And, once again, I think the last 2 or 3 years, we've done more building with tear-downs than, from just finding vacant land. Just once again, it's minimal.
Now, I've been given, you have to go through the zoning, the rezoning before the lot split. So we have kind of a timeline here from Debbie that she put together. So it's like going through the rezoning, which would be done by November, and then going into the lot split, and that would be done by the end of December. Because we have to do it by December, because otherwise you start over.
Well, let's not do that.
No, I remember midnight on the 31st of December meeting. So, yeah. So you can look at this. I'm not sure if you realized that the zoning had to go first before you split the lot.
Did you know that?
We're just,
So, but basically,
Tell us where you want.
okay.
Yeah.
do we have appropriate time to get through this process?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Before, yes.
I mean, we're
Just don't change your lot lines again.
Okay.
So I suggest, it's basically you would have everything passed by the end of the year, and then they would be in force in 30 days right after. So by the mid-January, all of the stuff, unless there's Board of Zoning Appeals, I don't know if you are going to be required to do that. I haven't talked to anybody about that.
To do what?
You're making it so you don't have to go through the BZA.
No.
No,
It's
well, our understanding from the Planning Commission, because that was one of our very first questions.
Right.
Do we have to go to the BZA? And our understanding coming out of there was yes. And
Because-
that's the reason.
Right.
That's candidly the reason that we produced the chart with the bulk controls and went back and said, if we move a couple of lines to increase some square footage and some setback issues, these are items that we would not have to
Right.
discuss.
Right.
So we're trying to limit
Yes.
what variances need to be requested.
Right.
Since it's already complicated enough.
Yes.
So unless we're told differently, our understanding is, here's what we thought the process was. Here, committee, 3 readings.
Wait 30 days.
Yes, but because it's being subdivided, you have to rezone it and then subdivision.
So 3 readings. Well, why don't we just take Debbie's schedule and memorize it?
It's on little orange there.
That's fine, that's fine. So I think, we're fine. Let's go back to the Planning Commission with the adjusted map, have them make a recommendation, then we'll come back.
Yep.
And we'll go from
Yeah.
there.
And when
And
we come back, we go right to a first reading.
That would be, and the rezoning will also have to have a public hearing, but we can do those together, parallel.
Okay, great.
So, because there needs to be a certain amount of time for public notification. So, okay, does that all make sense? Okay. Just think if you're trying to get something through Congress.
I just have
Yeah.
one quick comment, thank you. Or a question, then a comment. How long has the flower shop been closed?
The flower shop has been closed about
6 years?
No.
5 years? 5. Yeah.
Well, when did
Do I hear 6?
No, I thought it was less than that.
the
Has it
flower
been that
shop?
long? 3?
I'm thinking it's about 3.5 years, but I really can't respond without looking.
I guess I was just looking more of a general estimate. And so 3 years, we've had a lot that's been not providing a lot of value to the community. And it sounds like you've gone through a lot to try to change what is there into something that does provide value to the community. And I appreciate your efforts and your patience through that process. And it also sounds like you've adjusted your plans based on what currently exists in that neighborhood, which is also appreciated. And you've made adjustments based on the feedback from the zone or the committee that you went to. So based on what I've heard tonight and what I've read in the material, my initial reaction is that this is a very positive project. And I will echo the comments that were made earlier, which is that this fits into what we're needing within the city limits. And I just appreciate your efforts.
Good, thank you. Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll echo sentiments similar to Councilmember Smedley, and I appreciate your redevelopment. I appreciate the efforts to reinvest in our inner city community, the Near East Side. So, again, thank you, and I'm supportive of the project.
Okay. Administration? Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like your little orange? You can't have it
Well,
yet.
you go back to the planning commission to change this.
Oh, well, then why don't we do that? And then you keep those,
Okay,
Yeah.
okay? And when we come back out, you can give me new ones,
all right.
okay?
Okay. Thank
It could be
you.
yellow, I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Great. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Now, the second agenda item is super sexy, septage for the wastewater treatment. The engineer has requested that we change the Title V of our code to allow for septage to be hauled into the wastewater treatment plant by truck. And also to go with another ordinance that would be to charge for that hauling and dumping of septage at 5 cents per gallon of hauled septage. Administration?
Yeah, as you just mentioned, I mean, this is changing or amending section 5.04.05 of wastewater discharges. Everything stands within that ordinance as is, except for the amended portion, which is the City of Athens wastewater treatment plant works with accepting trucked sewage waste septage in accordance with the regulations established by the Service Safety Director and or his or her designee. I can go on and on and on.
Right.
Along with this, though, what will also change is the rate at which we receive septage, which will be 5 cents per gallon.
Per gallon. Yep.
Which is about 7 to 8 times what it is for receiving residents through the sewer system. And that's largely because of the additional energy costs required to process the septage as it comes into the city. But again, this was something that when the wastewater treatment plant was re-engineered and redesigned with the intent of receiving septage, that it's time for us to start receiving to honor
Right.
the EPA agreement.
Right. One thing, though, I would, based on the law director, is to make sure that we define septage beyond just like, wastewater, sewer, however it's defined, to make sure that at one point in the future, somebody who wants to start, bringing in fracking fluid, and I have talked to Andy about this before, and he's super, super protective of his microbes in wastewater treatment, so he will be very careful, but who knows, 10 years from now. So I'd like something like specifically to say.
What kind of sewage?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I'm in agreement with
Yeah.
you. If I may, to chime in, this is something I thought about while on council, to even have some level of at least identification as to where that septage is actually coming from, and i.e. parameters associated with injection wells that may be nearby or anything along those lines. I'm not 100% clear on whether the lab we'll be sampling. I don't know if Service Safety Director knows whether there'll be spot samples coming off of septage coming in, and whether
I would think at one point you would have to.
monitoring for benzene or anything like that.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
I think that would be something.
Could we mandate that in law to say that from time to time the lab would in fact take samples on a random basis?
Or again, as Member Fall was indicating, is it something that will just be part of the process as the truck's rolling up that the sample is run?
I thought that was something that was Andy was saying, but I think that in the very least we should have at least random sampling. I would think that he would want to sample everything just because.
I will clarify for council.
Okay.
I mean, how would they do that? A truck rolls in. Hi, I want to dispose of this. Well, okay, we don't have anybody available at the moment to run a test.
Well, maybe they only do it during certain times or hours.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions. And I'd like to have some sort of procedure.
Oh, we will.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to keep our discharge permit up to date and in compliance with the EPA rules and regulations. So we'll provide you with additional information to give you a level of comfort.
Yeah, I know. The only thing I worry about is that the political climate right now is very, very pro-industry. The laws are being relaxed even as we speak with the EPA and so on. So the EPA could say these are our standards today. Next year, well, they're not going to be quite as stringent. It's not good for business.
Mm-hmm.
And
they can.
And then all our microbes die.
And Andy would be very sad.
And Andy would be hurt. So
I just remember what Pennsylvania went through at one point. That's how they dealt with their fracking waste, and that's a really, really scary thought. So, and there might be other things beyond fracking that we just do not want in a residentially oriented wastewater treatment plant. That's why you have hazardous material sites. So,
Well, and I would also add that the issue with we have a specialized sewer treatment plant, that maybe can only handle certain types of, septage. So I think that having these rules and regs that everybody's discussing are super important. And again, administration's changed, political climate's changed. We know that. We know we're living through it right now. So that we are as specific as we can be for what we believe this community and that plant, which is not paid for, can handle, I think.
Right.
Responsible.
And so are you suggesting then that our trucked sewage waste that's defined in this new language is going to have additional language by next Monday?
Well, we will attempt to get it by then, but if not, it can start through after you've received all the information that you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Okay.
Defining septage.
yeah, I mean, there's.
Sure.
And I don't know if you want a reference to our fracking ordinance or not. I'm not sure if that would be. I'm not sure. I don't remember if there's definitions of.
You have a title.
Yeah, the title.
47.
I don't forget the 40. I don't remember the number. I just remember the name. Pete?
I do have one question. Thank you. And I don't know a ton about raw sewage, but I think I picked up somewhere that our system will work better if we have more volume in there at some point. So would accepting the right type of waste, is it actually going to make that system run even better? And maybe that's a question for somebody who's not even here.
I don't remember, Constance, I don't know if it actually makes the system run better. I know there's a fine balance with the bugs and, what is going through the digesters. But we can certainly find that out for you as to whether higher volume. It's something I've certainly pondered over with the 50 sewer corridor, because volume will go up there as well. So it's something I'm certainly, again, this is even when I was on council, pondering over the increase in what is going through the plant. But I can find out for you. Okay.
But there is capacity at this point. And if, 25 years down the line, the capacity was becoming less so, then probably it would, be stopped or reduced. I think that gives it some. Other questions? Exciting septic. Okay, great. So you have a little homework there, please. Thank you. Okay, and last on my agenda is looking at the Affordable Housing Commission. And I brought this forward a couple weeks ago and tabled it last week because there was some changes that were needed to the language. The changes basically was changing the numbers and the composition of the members. Included, as it stands now, there's a member of City Council, the mayor or his or her designee, the director of the Metropolitan Housing Authority or his or her designee, somebody from OU, and 7 additional members appointed by the City Council who represent the following: real estate, neighborhoods, finance, tenants, senior citizens, and 2 at-large members that will be appointed by the City Council. And then we changed the duties of basically this commission's, when it gets information and does analysis or looks at programs, they review and make recommendations. And we added the Safe Routes to Schools program, and the Economic Development Council as does Oh no!
I'm so sorry.
Order.
So just 2 more organizations that really do need information about housing. So.
I would just like to say that I brought the report with me, just so people know how big this report is.
How much does it weigh?
And it weighs a lot. And
she's so strong.
I wanted to highlight to council a few points. The first 8 or 9 pages or so, 9 pages actually, are kind of a synopsis of the entire report. And in writing this report and reviewing it when the committee worked on this, one of the other summaries or reports that we referred to was the Voight-Santer executive summary that was commissioned by the Economic Development Council. And that was something that the city of Athens was involved in. I'm going to say 2012. I could be wrong when that actually happened. The mayor was on council at that point, but and our past mayor was involved in that. They also referred extensively to our Athens Comprehensive Plan in the writing of that report, and then we developed this report. And I just wanted to say in the vision revolves around creating and we thought of our language very carefully when on the committee. The vision revolves around creating a well-balanced, multicultural community inclusive of professionals, disabled, low-income, minorities, and the upper represented retired, families, and single residences. So those are 2 things I just wanted council to remember as we continue to move forward on this. And I think the commission, the thinking is that the commission is the public part of a eventual public-private kind of partnership, and that there would even be possibly a more specific group or board or trustees, however it was named, who would really maybe have a director, maybe ultimately having a director, because this housing thing, you need professionals who understand the housing needs, and there's a lot to that. A lot of the guiding principles are here. The keys to success are here. The recommendations go on for 3 or 4 pages. So I encourage council before the vote to really look at that. And I also believe that there needs to be another ordinance, where you're going to discuss this, about the plan, that this document needs to be approved by council.
Right. And Debbie's going to look at whether it needs to be a motion or an ordinance on adopting it, which we did with the comprehensive plan. So it's not that unusual. Then it becomes a working plan and blueprint for City Council in the future.
And for those who did not receive this booklet, I believe that the President of Council will be sending you again the PDF of this document so that you have, I just happened because we received this at our lunch in December of 2016.
So, Council?
Yes, thank you. My main question was whether or not this commission was going to focus primarily on moderate income housing, which were some comments that were made at some point, and it sounds like that is not the case based on what I just heard from Michelle Pappy. Is that correct?
The mission and the vision involves all members of the community.
Okay. And when I was ruminating over and trying to figure out what suggestions I might be able to make to this particular commission, which is very much needed, as you all know, I had suggested and thought about suggesting expanding this, who would be on the commission, but then after some thought, it really isn't about who's on the commission, it's about the charge of the commission. And so long as the scope is not narrowly focused on a certain level of income, I would certainly be in support of this commission coming together and to ensure that we are adequately addressing the needs of everyone in our community, regardless of their income and regardless of their ability and accessibility. So, thank you.
Well, I think one thing that people forget is that you don't necessarily only work within the commission to do the needed work. Things that happen are ad hoc committees also, like people from the Sustainability Commission and the Disabilities Commission and the Housing Commission can work together also identifying specific projects or other things, so that right now we have nothing for housing. We have the sustainability, which was put forward by the comprehensive plan of something that they wanted to do. And the housing is something that's kind of not been addressed for quite a while. And so with the work that Michelle did with the people in the university and this thing keeps falling off here. The work that they did for more than a year, being able to go forward with something that will take over the role of what they've been doing to move the discussion of housing forward, I think is something that we can all. Okay. Patrick?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Councilmember Pappy. I read the entire booklet and I was quite impressed. I wanted you to know that. I do want to voice my concern now and no doubt in the future as well concerning the need for neighborhood schools and the effect what I would consider would be a blight and a devastation of neighborhoods if certain schools were removed from those areas. I find it ironic that Ohio University sunk so much time into emphasizing that we needed better quality housing for neighborhoods to attract young professionals to come to the neighborhoods to make Athens more attractive. And yet at the same time, it would seem that part of their procedure through offering potentially the sites for the new schools is perhaps going to have a detrimental effect to those neighborhoods. Yeah. I do want to just emphasize that, and I want to say I applaud the fact that the commission includes something about the schools in the powers and duties. Right. I would only say that I suspect it perhaps does not go as far as perhaps it should. So, right. But again, I wanted to thank Michelle for the hard work she did on that paper because it really was well done.
Thank you.
And I don't want to get sidetracked into a school discussion
sure,
because we could probably spend all night doing that. So thank you. And I really want to emphasize the amazing work this committee did. And it was long and hard, and I think a commission coming out of it is the first step of stuff that can really help change Athens. I mean, fundamentally be more equitable and fair and sustainable in the long run. Other questions? Did you? Okay. Mayor?
A question and a comment. My question is the current document still in draft form, and will we see changes at all to that draft, or is it just going to move forward as is?
You mean the report?
Correct.
No, the report is now reported.
It is
Yes.
reported and
Yeah.
is as is. Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay.
My comment is I, too, want to acknowledge all the work that Member Pappy, along with Steve Golding from Ohio University, put a lot of work. Your whole team put a lot of work.
Paul Logue from the city.
A lot of members, but I'm calling you out in a favorable way at this point in time. And I sat in on the meeting when this was brought forward to a larger group. And you could tell even in that meeting all the thought that went into something that just did not exist, at least in this level of detail. And so for that, I really applaud Member Pappy as well as Mr. Golding and everyone else who worked on this group to make this come to reality. I think this is a great guiding document. I'm also pleased with the composition, and in particular in bringing in the Metropolitan Housing Authority, because there's a lot of steeped history and knowledge with the executive director of the Athens Municipal Housing Authority. So.
Right. Okay. Last word? You're anything? Okay. One last thing is, I think it's important to realize that meetings and a report are great because that identifies the problems and puts forward some routes to solutions. But a plan can just sit on a shelf, and that if you don't have somebody to carry on that vision and that hard slogging work, like the comprehensive plan, after it was adopted, there was an ad hoc committee that went and spent a year and a half putting a lot of thought into how you implement it and how you measure the implementation of the comprehensive plan. And they came out with a report, and that's one way that we know where we are on that comprehensive plan. And this is the same thing. You know, it helps to keep planning documents alive and used. So, thank you. Any other questions?
I'll just make one. The reason that this is happening this fall is there was a change in university presidents, and they wanted the new president to be fully up to speed with the report. And it was one of the documents, and maybe the mayor can speak to this, that he was given pretty early on when he arrived in Athens. So this may have been coming forward sooner if it wasn't for the change in the university president.
Okay. Like the welcome wagon. Here's your welcome wagon. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. That's the end of my committee. Thank you.
Much. We'll move on to Finance and Personnel, and that's chaired by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Got a couple of items, appropriations, and then House Bill 49/House Bill 5, income tax laws. Going to put the appropriations first. Received some email concerning our water treatment plant loan. We have a $625,000 plus interest note that's out there, and we have 10 years to pay it off. And there's been some recommendations going back and forth between Andy Stone, our engineer, and our auditor about when and how much we should begin to pay on this. Reading from the last set of emails, it was somewhere between either $20,000 or $30,000 as a start to begin to pay this note. Auditor, care to speak to it?
Just quickly, the reason we are picking that small amount is because Andy's plan is to roll the balance of that engineering design loan into the plant loan that we're getting. Is that OWDA or WSRLF or whatever it is? It's one of those loans that will have an amortization schedule and will pay automatically going forward. But the interest rate for that right now is very reasonable in my mind. The reason we still have the wastewater treatment plant design engineering loan hanging out there is because the interest rate we were given at the time we got that loan for the interest rate was much higher than what we could get locally. There's not as much difference right now. He'd rather just roll it in, have one payment for the entire thing. So we do have to make a payment, and we're just going to, pay a minimal amount. And I think that's going to happen pretty soon, to where the loan papers are signed or finalized. So that's the reasoning for that.
Okay.
The water treatment plant, Member Reisner, I'm sure you saw, he suggested $200,000 paying down on that, because that is on us to pay off every year, and that's a really reasonable amount, more than I would have expected. But it's always good to move those debt payments down. So that's where we are on those two. Now those are due in December.
Okay.
So that paperwork has to come from Dennis Schwally, and once I have the okay and I get an interest rate from the bank, we'll move that along.
How soon do you expect that would be before us, so we can get this thing done?
I'd like to see it the 1st of October, but really the 2nd of October. Did I say early December, I believe, on those? Do you have that? Yeah, it's early December. So we have November. So maybe the 2nd regular session in October. Just depends on how quickly Dennis turns the paperwork around. I have paperwork from him now for our pumper truck that will start through in the next regular session. That was discussed previously.
Back to the plant, it was OWDA.
Was it? Thank you.
Yep.
And what amount were you going to, did we settle on, 20 or 30?
I don't know that we settled somewhere in there. Andy was willing to go up to 30.
I noticed the line, though, was rather, our margin's a little thin there.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so too. They aren't as healthy appropriation-wise as a wastewater plant. However, there is a schedule to increase fees, over 20 years, I believe, to help make those loan payments. So if anybody else has a preference, it'll be somewhere in there.
In the past, the city has accelerated payout of certain objects, like fire truck or. From my recollection, you can't do that with these types of loans, can you?
No, you cannot. Same with our pool loan, and actually the one we got on the parking garage improvements a few years ago. Those are bond issues, because we don't intend to pay them back within 10 years if it goes past 10. And even these notes, if we hang on to it for 10 years, after that we have to get a bond, and then our payments are set.
Okay, thank you.
Administration? Please speak on
Something.
Oh, okay.
Member
Happy?
Dennis Schwally is our bond counsel.
Bond counsel out of
Right, just so
Columbus.
everybody knew.
Okay.
He is our legal reference who writes our loan documents, which a major part is our ordinance that Debbie mostly deals with, but it goes through counsel. And then for the closing of the loan, there's another big fat packet of paperwork that has to be signed by a lot of people, in particular me, and so there's a lot of laws and rules about public entities borrowing money so that they don't get into trouble. So.
Okay. Some emails concerning transportation fund, fuel. Should I read this, or are you familiar with it?
I am. Paula
Okay.
came over to me as soon as I got here. That's how familiar I am, which is fine. Patty has been working on this at my request, and so while she was in there, she came up with an amount for that and for a few other funds that we need appropriations for. That would be lands and buildings, transit, street maintenance, and recreation. So those amounts, she put some amounts out there. We don't quite have that amount unappropriated in those funds, so I'll have to go in and look and see if we can move some money, maybe increase the revenue estimates and all that. So
Well, I noticed in her estimations, the numbers are always approximately. So I'm suggesting there's some wiggle room there somewhere.
Yeah, there probably is, and so I'll work with her more on that. Evidently, this just came late today after I had left work, so we can work around that. But those are the funds that we definitely need appropriations in for fuel.
Ever fall to you?
Yes. So this is usually budgeted into each line each year. So I'm just wondering I don't recall this particular fuel one being increased like this. So did we just budget it conservatively and then we just need to add more money? Obviously that's what we're doing.
Well, the other thing we do is there's possibly money to move, especially in the smaller amounts. We would move money around within those transaction classes. So fuel is within the 200 and 300s, and we are able to move money between those account lines ourselves without council approval. So, the ones that are a little bit tight, I'll definitely look and see if there's extra money in another account line and just move it into the fuel line to pay that bill. It's very hard to be that specific from year to year, and fuel is one of those things that can vary.
There's also there's two that are reductions. We're decreasing the fuel PO, which is water maintenance and sewer maintenance, not by a lot, but there's a decrease there. And, council has this before them, but so the public understands, lands and buildings is $2,000, recreation is $2,500, street maintenance $6,500, but then transit $18,000 to increase.
Most ones a lot more than Bobcat. And I can tell you, we've actually really tightened. There were years, and I'm sure Kathy, you remember, that we had to come back every year to increase fuel. So
part of these projections also involve payment after the end of the year that we have to account for. So when we get our bills from OU for fuel, where our vehicles go to gas up, those payments come in after the end of the year. And we have, like for electricity and gas, they come after the fact, and so we're paying this year's bills in January. So we have to account for that also.
Other comments? I don't believe I have anything else under appropriation.
we do.
Okay,
We do.
I knew it. I knew it.
I'll try to be quick. Also, we're doing a lot of reviewing the budget right now, and it looks like we need some extra money appropriated in the general fund in the 100s in court, about $52,000. Streets needs $20,000 for tree removal. Of course, both of these funds do have unappropriated balances to take that from. And then fire, I'll let Paula talk about this. We move money around for the lightning strike at the fire station to replace radios and computer equipment, but I think they need a little bit more money still.
Yes, it would have been my error. The invoice that we were all tracking that was just under $7,400 was only for repair of the infrastructure needed through our wireless communications to communicate back and forth, and they still needed $3,500 for their computer replacements. So I don't know where we are in that reading.
I think it was just on the first reading.
Yeah.
First reading. So I guess I would ask if we could increase amend, and then actually, since we have a bill to pay, which is indeed from the repair of that infrastructure. But according to David Dunning, our CIO, that cost is assigned back to that division for that component for them to talk.
Yeah, we adopted that
Okay.
because I know it was
Well,
an
we'll just bring
emergency.
forward another appropriation.
So we'll do just another
Yeah.
appropriation with it. Thanks.
But I recall that there was definitely equipment as part of that package that we passed.
I believe that there was as well, but that was all communications. This is computers that were fried during the hit as well,
Okay.
which were not part of that went forward.
I understand.
Yeah.
Oops. Member Fall, I think, was first.
Well, I just want to point out that the tree removal is, I assume, green ash trees.
Not only ash trees, it's other street trees that are just dropping limbs, and we have been inundated, and we have a quote now for 18,000, and I'd say we get weekly phone calls to go
Right.
review another tree.
Right.
So as we budget for 2018, we're going to seek to have more of that.
That was basically my question, because as in the neighborhood I live in, people have been taking down trees, not just for infrastructure projects, but for dead ash trees.
These are right-of-way trees.
Yeah.
They are right-of-way trees, and we're seeing this everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm surprised by how many dead trees there are like out in Stroud's. I didn't know that there were so many ash trees in the area, but they stand out. You know.
You don't miss it till it's gone.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, oh yeah, I think that's all for appropriations.
Okay, 7, for just to get things clear about the lightning strike at the fire station for next week.
Yes, please.
We're going
and we
to-
can discuss it again tomorrow. I'll tighten it up.
And again, because there is a bill to pay, we're going to have to introduce an ordinance, first reading, suspend the rules, and pass it. The way I'm reading it.
We can discuss, as long as I can meet the obligation to pay that existing invoice. What it really does is
I mean, we're
delay
good
fire.
for it, you know.
Okay.
I mean, they know where we live.
It delays fire with their computer replacements.
I understand.
That's how it
Okay.
affects that.
I just want to be clear on that. Auditor, anything else?
Not for appropriations.
Okay, well, let's get the really meaty thing here, House Bill 49.
Yes.
I think everybody has received email. I know it's not on our drive, but we're just looking at it here.
I sent that Friday. It was a lot of information I was forwarding from Tina, our income tax administrator. Included a pared down, if you can imagine, PowerPoint from her presentation at the tax conference that she presented at this summer. Sample ordinance, a letter from the law firm outlining the issues, and what we're asking for is to join a group lawsuit in favor of that, and the pay scale, what the cost would be to the city. We did a similar thing for the cell tower thing, different law firm, but different type of issue, and we were successful at that, so hopefully we will be for this. As I understand, a lot more entities have signed on for this already than they had for the cell tower thing, but be that as it may, let me move along. So I'm just going to read part of Tina's letter since she wrote this to everyone. Mayor Patterson, Council President Nisley, and members of Council, thank you for taking the time to consider the legal action proposal we have presented to you tonight. I'm sorry I was unable to attend. However, I've asked Auditor Heck to read this in my absence. In the last 5 years as your tax administrator, I have represented our city multiple times at the state level in what I feel has been a fight to maintain control over our local municipal income tax and main source of revenue. The first major defeat came with the passing of HB 5 in December of 2014, which forced a wide range of revenue-impacting changes upon our city. HB 5 added language to ORC 718 that either forced us to comply or risk losing the ability to administer an income tax. And we updated our ordinance and came into compliance with the state, and that was all done with Council's help and cooperation. Even though we are still in the process of implementing and phasing in the vast number of changes made in HB 5, the state has continued to make changes to municipal income tax. In this year's budget bill, HB 49, the legislators at the state took it one step further and passed a flawed centralized collections language that would force us to give the Department of Taxation, ODT, the authority to collect our taxes for businesses that choose to opt into the program. The ODT does not have the authority to administer a municipal income tax. That authority is administered through local ordinances. They are using the language from HB 5 to force us to adopt 15 new chapters of income tax code that would give the state tax commissioner the authority to administer the tax. Not only do I feel this is a complete overreach from the state, but a continued assault on our revenue. The new centralized collection does the following, and I'm not going to read all these. We will no longer have the ability to review returns for accuracy. We will have no authority to have a return corrected, reviewed, and audited. Refunds will be approved by the Ohio Department of Taxation with no prior approval from us. And since refunds are taken directly from the monthly revenue from the state, and returns are only reported twice a year, we would have no way to post payments to accounts. Therefore, all money received from the state would never be posted to individual accounts in our system, which is an issue. These are just a few of the items. I've sent along the PowerPoint presentation with more details for your review. This eroding of our home rule and continued assault on our revenue has to stop. That is why I'm asking you today to pass an ordinance to join the coalition of cities throughout the state to challenge the centralized collection. Let Athens be one of the first to step up and say this is an overreach and a violation of our home rule right. Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter. Tina Timberman, Athens City Tax Administrator. I will add that I have discussed this, Tina and I both, with our law director as soon as this option was put out there, and she's all on board. And as I mentioned, there is a sample ordinance included that Lisa has also reviewed.
Member Falk.
Thank you. Tina has worked tirelessly. Just amazing being a leader in this whole fight. And we've talked a lot about this because it is a complete overrule of our home rule. I mean, it's just phenomenal. To me, it sounds like it's the tax cheat, sort of manna from heaven, because it's like it gives completely, to me, if you can't audit, then, it just says do whatever, make up numbers. So I'm all for this. I think that we have been we've been a leader with Tina, and I think that this is a really important thing, because if we don't stop the erosion of our home rule, who knows next, where they'll go.
I appreciate that, and I knew that home rule thing would get to you especially, but it is a big deal. And actually, a few months ago, I went and testified in front of the House Senate about that part of it. And they went ahead, that and the fact that they were attaching tax language to a budget bill, they went ahead and did it. But it's pretty messy, and it does have a big effect on us. And yes, Tina is known throughout the state, and Athens is really one of the leaders in this fight. And it's really appreciated by the OML. She works very closely with Kent Scarrett. And because then it shows that not just the big cities are the ones saying they'll be affected because of their numbers are much higher. But of course, it's all relative. And so our numbers might not seem high to Cleveland, but when you look at our total budget, they are. And it's just been, it's really difficult. And the refunds, that's an issue. We issue about $200,000 worth of refunds a year. And we also find many mathematical errors, calculation errors when we audit all of our returns, and that attention to detail is not going to happen at the state level. We know that. And there's also, for me, the cash flow issue. If we're getting paid from them once a month, we're used to a revenue coming in weekly. And we will still have some, but on the business returns, some of those are bigger than you would think. And it's a tough one.
Member Spendley.
Thank you. I have a question or comment. I assume the cost associated with participating in this is doable for a city of Athens to be. And so,
well,
since you're here tonight,
they're saying 1%, but Tina and I both will lay money down with anybody that in a year they'll say they can't do it for that. And we'll come back and increase that amount.
I'm talking about the cost of participating in the...
Oh, yeah. There is a sheet in there, and I think our amount is $6,000.
$4,000.
$4,000? Oh, yeah, they redid it. We complained. That was our payment schedule for the cell tower issue. But they cut it off at like $50,000 and above, all paid the same. So they bumped it up to $100,000 as the top. If you have at least that many residents, you pay that. So, yeah, I forgot they did. So we did. It's a little bit less.
Okay.
Which is doable.
So that was my question, and I was assuming that was your answer. And based on that, I would echo the comments from Member Fall that we appreciate your office's persistence in keeping at the forefront of this issue. I do remember you were talking about this several months ago, and so yeah, this sounds like it's.
I appreciate that because it is frustrating, but it's really the right thing for us to do for our main source of revenue for the city.
President Isaac.
Oh, I was just going to say that this sample ordinance then authorizes the mayor and the law director to initiate litigation, to join in with that group, and then talks about this bill could become effective January 1. So it would have an emergency clause with it so that it could be passed in time to take action.
Mr. Mayor.
I just want to put some things in perspective, because I, too, have been in almost constant contact with Tina Timberman about this issue and her concerns. And, just so you know, through the Ohio Municipal League, Ken Scarrett has the utmost respect for Tina, too, and knowing that Athens is kind of the spotlight is on Athens with this moving forward, knowing that we're a rural community, but with strong tax administrator who's highly regarded at the State House with a lot of testimony. The other thing, and I shared this with Tina early on, in that I kind of felt like the scale that was for SB 331, which was small cell, which we were successful in, but the pay scale I felt was skewed. It was skewed more heavily on the smaller communities, and asked if Tina would push that envelope to see if larger municipalities, if we could change that scale a little bit, and I was glad to see that happen. So under the SB 331, our cost was started out, I believe, at $8,000 and dropped to $6,000. This, in turn, is starting at $4,000. This is also an issue that you're going to see a lot more cities jumping in on this and joining, much like we saw with 331, but we were with a group of 50 other cities. They're anticipating 100 plus behind this particular bill, because this is overreach. This is total overreach, much like SB 331, which was overreach in terms of public right-of-way with our infrastructure and being able to control communications, or at least utility. This, on the other hand, is what happens with the business income tax that comes in, and someone trying to take that away. And I totally agree with Auditor Hecht and with Tina Timberman with the impact this has when it comes to errors that are made. If errors are made, and they can be substantial errors to where all of a sudden you're not going to see it, so we need to, again, stand up for ourselves and stand up with our sister cities and villages across. Villages are included in this pay scale, by the way. Villages under 5,000 also have their own pay scale that is within that, which I don't recall whether that was in SB 331 or not. But it's kind of irrelevant with this case. It's great to see that even smaller municipalities of 5,000 or less can jump in, and now they have a voice.
Other comments?
I would just say that as an advocating group, our Ohio Municipal League really educates us as elected officials well, and also steps up to the plate. We are members of that organization, but steps up to the plate in helping to, especially for the smaller cities and villages. Usually the larger cities have a lot of people.
Exactly.
And we need this additional help in, getting our needs met. And
strengthen numbers, as they say. And I will say on the small cell, Cleveland did their own lawsuit in opposition to that. They could do that, but the rest of us, we could never have hired someone on our own to help with that.
Right.
And yes, the OML, Kent Scarrett, relies on Tina heavily to explain tax law to him. He's very smart, but they deal with a lot of other issues besides municipal income tax, and it gets complicated. And the mayor reminded me that we're talking about business returns right now, but this is just the foot in the water. I mean, the idea will be to take over all of our income tax. I mean, they put that out there several years ago, and we've all been fighting against that, so now they're picking at us and just chipping away until they get control. And, revenue. They're just taking a large part of our revenue by charging us to collect that.
Well, thank you. I just want to add that the way I look at it, this has just been an easy way for the state of Ohio to try to balance their budget. They don't have the guts to raise income taxes on corporations on their own because they fear a political backlash politically. So the easy way to do it is you go to the communities and you take their money. They're doing the collecting. Now they're saying, well, we want part of it. And let's just be blunt about it. They're stealing it from us. You know, it's legalized theft. And I think we need to
It might not even be
stop
legal.
it. Yeah.
Well, they've been chipping away at us, as you all well know, with the estate taxes and the local government funds over the years, and this is just their next.
Bunch of spineless imbeciles up there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's all I had.
All right, we'll move on to City and Safety Services Committee, and that's chaired by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. I welcome the opportunity here to discuss a few things. This evening we have two bullet points, the percent for art brochure as well as the police body cameras. We're present with Ms. Carol Patterson, who's the chair of the Municipal Arts Commission this evening, who will speak briefly on the brochure. Real quick, just a little bit of background for TV folks and those in the audience. The Municipal Arts Commission is a commission designated here in the city, charged with making recommendations to City Council and the administration on art-related ideas and support efforts. It's not a funding or re-granting organization, and oftentimes we see letters in the newspaper that are misguided and misinformed. The Municipal Arts Commission has no authority to purchase work and really to make recommendations to city leadership. They consider proposals from public and private. They consider proposals from private, public, and government sources by forming ad hoc study groups made up of artists, citizens, and municipal commissioner members who, after due consideration, make recommendations to the Municipal Arts Commission, who then deliberate and forward the recommendations on to the city administration. This evening, the chair of the Municipal Arts Commission, Ms. Patterson, is here to speak with us about the art brochure, which is related to legislation that was passed in 2007, which is a percent for art legislative piece. We should have some information on our hard drives, and as well, I'm not sure if it's been handed out, but I'll turn it over to Ms. Patterson. Thank you.
Yeah, we do.
You all have this. Good. That makes life easy. I am indeed Carol Patterson and chair of the Municipal Arts Commission, and I'm here to address the use of this flyer that has been designed and written by Josh Beerborn, who is our newest AMAC member, and he's been working very hard on it. At this point, if you all have suggestions for wording, we can still change this. Lisa Eliason has weighed in and said there were a few places. So I went back and reread it today, trying to read it from somebody that hasn't seen it previously, and I always can change words. So I found some places that I wasn't sure that I think are finalized. But what we need to establish is then, do we need to come back with it in its final form if we make a few changes, depending on how substantive they are? Didn't seem to me like that was the issue. It's just strange wording. And the one place that it misstates is it implies that AMAC created the book, The Essence of Athens, and I would like to change that wording, because no, we didn't do that awesome task. We certainly have used it and we love it, but it's not something that we created. one of the questions that came up was this photo on the front, and was this copyrighted, whatever? Did we have permission to use this photo? How the photo came about, our Josh went to Joel Prince, who was the photographer for the tourism board, and this was one of all of the photos, but the one on the last page came from there. So they have all been given permission to be used by the city previously. And so I believe that question has been adequately answered, but if it hasn't, we'll pursue it further and find that out. One of the things that actually I met with the mayor and Paula today, and we talked a little about this. One of the things that makes this especially appropriate on the front is that the document really addresses private businesses, not the city, but private businesses creating artwork on public property. That's what this represents. So it seems very appropriate that that covers the brochure. Also, something that you need to understand, and none of you, I don't know, Kent, were you on council in December of 2007?
No.
Okay, so it's been 10 years. It's about time we sorted this out. So the city is not required to allocate funds for every major project. They have chosen, you have chosen, the administration has chosen to take that commitment and add the enhancement of art to our city projects. And so the fact that private companies are not directed to do this, it's 1% of a project that would go to artwork within a project, up to $10,000. There is a limit on that. So we are encouraging them to do the same thing that the city has done. This is a great part of Athens' culture, history, tourism, all of those things. And so to encourage artwork is a great plan. So the flyer is designed to be at the code office. So when someone comes in to propose a project, this will be in the materials that they receive, so that they will understand what it is, how it works, who to go to. All of that is contained in the piece. So that's basically what we're bringing to you to say, okay, does this look like something that you believe these people who are proposing a project would benefit from? Then let's go with it. And we have priced it out. It would cost us approximately $1 a copy. So what our thought was, maybe produce 50 copies, have them at code, see how it goes, see if it needs rewording, anything, but start with the 50, which we have in our funds, so that is not a problem. So, questions from you or comments?
Thank you, Ms. Peters. Councilmember Fall.
When just this one word, it says, under policy details, the third paragraph, it says $100,000, up to $100,000 to include fine art in conjunction with your building product. I think of fine art as being, Metropolitan Museum pictures, paintings. So is that?
I would agree, and that was one of those words that I picked up on today. I think that fine art does have different meanings to different people, but I think ours, it's much more representative of our population, and it is not always fine art. It could be, but I think just eliminating that word would clarify.
Yeah, because it just, in my mind, that's the first thing that pops up. I think this is an awesome, really cool project, and I appreciate you guys putting it together. I think there's been a lot more public art that's been put out there, and any time a new project comes up, people always say how much they appreciate it. So,
and some projects automatically include artistic elements, but some contractors might need help with how to do that. There is also the language in the flyer that mirrors the ordinance that refers to, if you don't want art on your project property, you can donate that amount of money in a fund for art anywhere in Athens. So that is one of the things that we wanted to establish, that there's a way to create a fund. I seriously did not know where this ordinance had gone to. Debbie certainly was aware of the questions back and forth, and it's taken us at least a year to kind of get it clear in our mind what we should do with this. But it isn't appropriation, so it isn't in the code, but it is an ordinance, so it's a recommendation for procedure. And so what we're trying to do is clarify that and get it into the hands of the people who would use it.
Thank you. I believe we have a few other questions. Councilmember Smedley, followed by Councilmember Pappy.
Thank you. This is very nicely designed, so it makes you want to read it, so I appreciate that piece to it. I'm neither a developer nor a contractor, so I would recommend, if you haven't already done so, having one of those people read this and see if it's clear to them, and if not, incorporate their feedback. And that's it.
Yeah, Councilmember Pappy, followed by Councilmember McGee.
I really appreciate the maintenance portion of that, because even if they can provide to the fund, because there will be time when, maybe one of our boxes needs to be rewrapped, or there's graffiti or something. And I think that oftentimes happens with art projects. You walk by it every day, or you see it and you think, why can't that be cleaned up or fixed or repaired or whatever? So that's good thinking there in terms of.
And we have had that issue this year, and I did find the language that basically says, and that's our language from previous documents, but that if a piece of art is in disrepair and needs more maintenance than the cost of the project, that it can be decommissioned.
Right.
Thank you. Councilmember McGee.
Thank you, Councilmember Butler. Ms. Patterson, I want to first thank you. I think you do a wonderful job. I'm going to give you some criticism, and I hope you take it in the right way. I'm always concerned about what I consider a lack of diversity for the citizens of Athens. And when I see this particular piece of art that highlights downtown Athens, I sometimes grimace at the thought that it represents only the white citizens of Athens County, which, as far as the coal miners and laborers of Athens County, they were certainly not of one particular race. And I think art needs to show that. So although I understand this is part of the brochure, and I understand that, I would ask, and I've opposed a few other projects that have been proposed where they seem to be lacking the diversity that really makes Athens a special place. So I would just say, and again, I would emphasize this is not meant as criticism. It's just a comment that I would hope that any art that is either highlighting Athens or is developed in Athens in the future does include some sort of a showing of the diverse cultures that Athens includes, and that it's more than merely one particular aspect. So again, thank you.
And the way we would do that is in requests for proposals for different artwork. We say things like reflect the Athens population, culture. We could add the word diversity in there, and perhaps that would...
Well, and if I may comment too, the last sentence, I believe, on the first paragraph says, we want Athens to become an arts and cultural destination that recognizes its outstanding artists and the contributions they make to a lively, diverse, and thriving community. But I appreciate the comments as well, too, though, acknowledging that.
And so, does this take a vote, or is it done? Or
Probably a motion at the next business meeting would take care of it.
Okay, just a motion.
And I think we do have one item to still clarify with that image of the mural. If I'm following the string of emails that occurred, I know Josh Birnbaum, who designed it, clarified that he had permission from Joel Prince, and he also had permission from Designing Local from Amanda Golden. The question was, do you have permission from the artist who painted the mural?
Yes, I understood the question, and that's why I said I'll check again if you want me to.
That.
I will just check with the tourism board of what kind of permission they hold, and perhaps get a copy of that we
in writing
could have.
Could we get it in writing?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Anything from the administration as well?
No, I'm happy to see this, and as all of you on council know, that the city has put a lot of efforts into projects where we're including arts in them, even retrofits. The one that comes to mind right off the top of my head is the Depot Street lift station with the new mural on it, as well as Oxbow Bridge underneath, the relief that is underneath there, which was not inexpensive. But we put a lot of forethought into including arts into a lot of the city projects moving forward. The new mural, which former council member Patterson was involved in through AMAC, which is the wastewater treatment plant clarifiers, which will have new murals on that as well. And it was AMAC that really led the charge on the RFP as well as Port Laureate that we have for the city of Athens. So anyway.
Thank you, Mary.
Well, and the Oxbow Bridge work was recognized by an award.
It was.
Yeah, so.
Also, I'll just toss this out. It is possible if private owners have a retaining wall, if they contact us, it's possible that we can partner them with an artist. This is a conversation that's been going on for a while. So that would be what they would do. Contact Debbie if they don't know who I am, but to talk to the Arts Commission about it. There are different ways we can do this, including one that we're looking at possibly working with Arts West to make such partnerships. Private property, retaining walls, instant art. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Patterson. Again, friendly reminder, it's all a volunteer effort here regarding this with the private sector. So it's not enforced or imposed on anyone. They're just being encouraged. And the brochure would help communicate that. Thank you. Moving on, we have Police Chief Pyle here this evening to educate us and begin a discussion. This is merely just a starting point this evening with the introduction of police body cameras. Again, I think if we consider safety as a paramount issue and the assistance of technology in our community, this is a starting point for that dialogue. Again, I'm not the expert on this area. I acquiesce, and I'm grateful that our chief is here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Butler and council members. I'm not here necessarily to advocate for the addition of cameras, body-worn cameras in the police department. I'm here really to provide information to council so that you can make a full consideration when in deciding to fund an initiative like this. I'm certainly not opposed to having cameras in the department, nor am I overly concerned with their use. But I do foresee some issues, certainly with financing and or cost, and with perhaps expectations. And so I'm here having Mayor Patterson asked me well over a year ago, prior to the tax initiative, to start doing some due diligence on body-worn cameras, that there was interest from council members in implementing them in the department if the cost was acceptable. And so over the last year and a half, I've kind of done some intermittent research on them and done that due diligence. I've talked with several other agencies, both large and small, even including metropolitan agencies that I don't want to name. I have contacts all over the state and even outside the state in law enforcement, and I can tell you that there are success stories and there are failure stories with the implementation of cameras. What I am proposing to the mayor and council, should we go with body-worn cameras, and that we try to get into a cloud-based system, is really based on the stories that I've heard from other agencies, that IT maintenance on body-worn camera systems is labor-intensive and can add to the personnel costs of BWCs. Also, that there are concerns with public records, because we would be creating an entirely new set of public records for the public to consume. These would be entirely the public's records, but there are certain laws that require labor-intensive redaction to take place, victims' names in certain instances, certainly uncharged suspect names, things like that. There are privacy concerns. The ACLU initially had come out supporting BWCs. Now I think they're kind of in the middle of the road, where they do support their use, but they are concerned about privacy issues, private citizen privacy issues. So these things just kind of wrap up into one big package, which is there are a lot more concerns over, more so than just should we have these, should we record our police officers and their actions in the community. There are a lot of things we need to be concerned with, and so I can answer questions based on what I've learned in the last year and a half.
Thank you, Chief. Councilman McGee.
Thank you. Chief, I first would like to apologize to you because, as you know, you and I have had some differences, and I've had differences with law enforcement officers, but I find it reprehensible that the chief of police would have to sit through an hour and a half of a city council meeting to just talk to us. I think you should always be granted priority, and I wish that whoever does the agenda would note my comment on that. So I do apologize to you as a city council member for keeping you waiting for an hour and a half to discuss this with us. As far as the cameras themselves, thank you for providing this information. I find it really valuable, and as the mayor knows, I'm definitely a proponent of the body cameras, and for various reasons. When I'm in the courtroom, I hear different stories, and I always wonder, if a body camera or a recording device could perhaps illuminate the truth perhaps a little bit more, because we're often guessing on things. And dare I say it, we live in a community of young people, which perhaps contains some people who violate the law, especially the drinking laws, on numerous occasions, as you may know. So I'm always curious about things like that. I also want to point out to members of council that we had a rather interesting incident, I believe about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, where prosecutor Tracy Meek actually prosecuted a case, an OVI case, where there were no tests whatsoever, no tests whatsoever. And she obtained a conviction based solely upon the recording of the defendant in that case. And it was mainly because of his slurred speech and his movements. And I found that very, very interesting because, again, without that kind of camera, I think the police officer would have been in a very difficult spot of merely having said, well, the defendant's speech was slurred. What does that mean when you can actually hear somebody who's unable to enunciate correctly? I think that another important issue for the city, and I would emphasize this, is that, as you may know, as some council members may know, that when we discuss being under the influence of alcohol for someone under 21, we're talking about a relatively very low level of alcohol. For OVI, it's 0.02 for someone under 21, so that when we're dealing with somebody being stopped on the streets of Athens and being accused of being underage for using alcohol or under the influence of alcohol, often there's not a whole lot of symptoms that would normally appear. However, I think with a body camera or some sort of recording device, that a fact finder could really see if there's anything that really shows that this person is under the influence. Now, we all know that people under 21 should not go out and be drinking alcohol whatsoever, but there are some exceptions to the prosecution. So I think that's a very important point. And I think another issue is, of course, the insurance benefits that the city of Athens may reap from this. And again, I don't know if you've investigated that. I know about a year ago I sent over to the mayor a little article saying that insurance companies were actually providing free recording devices for the at least the first year because they were trying to lower some of the costs associated with the police brutality cases. And I would be the first to state that many of those cases, I think, are frivolously filed. The only one who benefits from those would be the attorney who files it. So even though I go both ways in this, I'm cognizant of the fact that there are some benefits to the city and to the police department by having this kind of protection. Finally, I wanted to say that I agree this whole thing is a little more expensive than I had anticipated over a 5-year period. I believe it's about 90-some thousand. Was that right?
99,000.
Okay. Broken down, of course, in 5 years per year, it's much less. It's about 20,000 per year. I wonder if there's any way that any of that can be covered by municipal court fees. I wonder. And another issue that I might suggest is that I think often you might get the same kind of protection with a recording device that is not necessarily a camera and which would be certainly less expensive if it were more a recording device. And I know I'm always amazed how people will have cell phones and just turn them on with a flick of a button and suddenly are recording the conversations. Often in cases that we may or may not have to deal with in the city of Athens. And I know there was recently an issue of what was said at one particular time that may have led to a civil issue. But often the real issue is what is said, not so much what is seen. So again, I would applaud you on what you've done as far as giving us this information. I would applaud the mayor as he knows I've nagged him for some time, but I appreciate your bringing it to council and giving us that opportunity. I would suggest that as an alternative, if council feels for any reason that this cost of this is excessive for some reason, that we start out, if there are other opportunities to provide the sound recording, I think that would be essential. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Other questions or comments from council members? Yes.
Thank you. Sorry,
yes.
Is that me?
Yeah,
okay.
No, yes.
So I appreciate the material that was provided, and the article sort of spelled out that there are a lot of things to consider, and you even mentioned this evening. How would you recommend council members approach this in thinking about it? What would you recommend our thought process be in terms of helping you decide or helping the process along in figuring out if this is the right decision, because it is it's a complicated issue, I'm sure, and I'm a newer member of council, so I'm new to the topic in general. So I guess that my question is, how would you recommend we move through this and think about it?
Well, there is current legislation on the public records aspect of body-worn cameras. Right now, they are treated through Supreme Court ruling very similar to 911 recordings, which are there 100% releasable. However, other public records law does attach. For instance, there is a law that we do not release uncharged suspects' names out of fairness and civil liberties concerns and civil rights concerns. And so there is legislation that tries to address some of those issues. There's legislation that stiffens the restrictions on releasing that information. There's also counter legislation that loosens. So it's not necessarily a partisan issue. It's a regional issue, I think. And there are politicians on both sides of the issue that say they should be public records, that they shouldn't be public records. Different states are approaching these differently. Some states consider BWC information evidence, and we do not release evidence for public consumption. So if Ohio were to consider BWC's footage in Ohio as evidence, they would not be public records. So I guess my first recommendation would be that we follow what's happening at the state level to see very, very intently what's going on with the public records, because it has a huge impact in employment costs or payroll costs in my department. Simply because I think if we implement a body-worn camera system, even in a cloud system, which comes with software to be able to easily redact information that we need to according to public records law, it's still almost a full-time job to do that on a daily basis. As you could imagine, we average 2,000 arrests a year, so what does that break down to? 52 weeks a year, I don't know, 40 arrests a week, roughly. So 40 arrests could potentially have a new public record that has to be reviewed in its entirety. An arrest can take up to an hour to complete from start to finish. The new record set may be an hour, so I now have 40 hours, let's say at 40 arrests, 40 hours of video that cannot be rushed through. I have to set an employee down and have them watch 40 hours a week of video to make sure that according to a public records request, we're not handing out Social Security numbers, identifying information, uncharged suspect names, things like that.
Face.
Well, faces, that kind of information is releasable, except in juvenile, for instance, in juvenile. But you can imagine we have to blur out certain parts of video. 40 hours, that's an average. That's a best guess. So I've talked with the law director about this, and in fact, I can't remember if it was the auditor and the law director and I sat down and talked about the financial concern of this. Is that right, Kathy? About 6 months ago, maybe. I don't remember. And I don't want to speak for her. She's not here. But we'll tell you in that meeting, my takeaway was she had a lot of concerns about the cost of the city not dedicating a full-time employee to the public records aspect of this. And so we do not have a full-time employee that concurrently we can spare to sit down and do this. And it would be a civilian employee anyway. So with the $20,000 a year that this is cost estimated to be over 5 years, there's probably a new position that we have to consider for the department just to manage the public records part of it. And we might be able to start that out part-time, but I don't suspect that what I've given you in costs will go down. Rather, I would say $20,000 a year for the equipment and the cloud storage is where we start, and it would probably go up from there. And I would say that even if we start at, say, a position 20 hours a week, I think that's going to be difficult at best to maintain. We're probably looking at a 40-hour-a-week position. Also, if you would, I would say that we have to consider the benefit of having the footage versus the loss of potential patrol hours from the street, because it's not just there's this program or any program like it would not simply allow the video to be uploaded with hands-free technology, and the officer doesn't how do I say this? Doesn't have any other obligation other than to record the video, turn the machine on or off. They actually have to go in and add metadata tags to the video at the end of each shift or at the beginning of the oncoming shift. And so there is, we estimate that, and all the vendors, and I've talked to about 6 different vendors over the last year, mostly at the chiefs' conferences. They all tell you that it averages about 30 minutes per shift per officer, where they have to be involved with the system and on the computer or in the office. Most of that gets done in the office. In the Athens area, wireless technology is hampered by geography and the hills and whatnot. So we find the best wireless technology is actually inside the department rather than outside. So 30 minutes a shift per officer. We have 20 officers when we're at full staffing assigned to patrol division. So you're looking at, on average, about 2,600 hours a year lost potential patrol time. That's time that we're going to take away from the officers' schedules to be out in the community and put them in the office, downloading data and editing data, not editing the recordings, but editing the metadata attached to the recordings so that we can find the incidents after the fact. That has to be done by the officer. So we have to consider that. So I guess it's much more than simply a quote from Axon or WatchGuard or any of the other vendors out there about it's this going to cost you this amount of money for the actual camera and for the storage. It's also personnel costs, public records concerns, and whatnot. And then the article that I attached from Force Science is just simply something that helps you with perspective. I shared with the mayor and Paula earlier today that when there are concerns about use of force incidents and what cameras can and can't do, what cameras cannot do is feel emotion or factor the human factor in dynamic use of force situations. And if you don't want to or if you're not concerned with that in regards to police use of force, you can look at it from a completely different perspective, but it's totally analogous when you look at, say, the incident of the Miracle on the Hudson with Captain Sullenberger and his actions landing the plane in the Hudson. If you've ever watched the movie, you'll know that the FAA did a serious inquiry, and their data and their simulators had him basically being reckless or negligent in how he piloted that plane, and then he got them to factor in the human factor, which these cameras can't do as well when they're recorded. So that's really what that article is about, is the 10 common misperceptions about what cameras can do versus what they actually do, or what they should do versus what they actually can do. So that's why I included that. But even having said all that, really for us it's a cost concern. What is the benefit to the community versus the overall cost? There are many hidden costs and many hidden concerns. And I think I've given you kind of a preface or an overview of what they are. I'm still not opposed to implementing them in the department. I think from an evidentiary perspective, they'll be helpful. I have both positive experiences with the in-car video when we had it back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I've had positive experiences with it, and I remember a local attorney taking video out of my hand, putting it in the court's player, watching his client run a red light, turning around to him and saying, "You're pleading guilty." Then it was a DUI case, and the red light was probable cause for my stopping him. And then I also remember watching a video of me trying to stand a drunk up who almost fell over when I was doing a DUI stop. And from the angle that I had and the graininess in the video, it looked like I manhandled the suspect and shoved him into the car, when in actuality I kept him from falling over. So I've had both positive and negative experiences with video, and I don't think this will be any different. So I think it'll mostly be positive for us.
Thank you, Chief. I do believe we have a few more questions or comments.
Thank you. I appreciated the handout that you provided by the Force Science Institute, especially number 9 and 10. They kind of struck me. A camera encourages second guessing, and a camera can never replace a thorough investigation. So I think the example you just provided there at the end, what you said, you can never replace a thorough investigation. The cost to a city of ours of something like this would be a lot, but then on the other hand, if there's a lawsuit, I don't know. It goes back and forth. I appreciate your open-mindedness on this to hear. I don't know where I personally fall on it. I mean, you read the information. Member McGee is in court daily. It's a difficult issue to parse out.
If I could, on the liability side, the city's under no obligation to deploy body-worn cameras. However, when we do, the city will be obligated to meet the standards of public records, laws of evidence, those kinds of things. So when talking with the law director, and I don't know if you want to echo the sentiment, she was concerned about the liability we would be creating by implementing the program if we didn't adhere to those standards. And the cost of just one lawsuit for releasing information that we shouldn't have more than justifies adding a personnel cost to the department to help us manage the release of that public record. So that's
Thank
just
you
a
for
different
sharing that.
perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Katsas, followed by Councilmember Smedley.
Yes, thank you. I guess my question is: are there other cities that are using that are the same size as us and have similar crime patterns that are using these systems?
The closest I could tell you would be Lancaster, and the former chief, he's retired now, but Don McDaniel, and I had numerous discussions. I think Lancaster's comparable in size. Different clientele. They don't have near the college population that we have, but they've implemented them and they've had pretty decent success with them. He will tell you that there is a huge, at least in his agency, he would have told you that there was a huge cost in the public records maintenance side of things. They used the Axon cameras. I've talked with, I have contacts in one of the largest agencies in the state of Ohio. I'm not going to tell you which one. Tell you that they implemented a system. It was an entirely in-house system where they absorb the IT concerns. They have to provide servers and whatnot, and the commander that oversees that program says it's just an abject failure because the cost to maintain the IT side of things and to store the data that an agency their size generates in a year was just underestimated in the extreme, and he recommended staying away from the servers and having to maintain our own maintenance. I will tell you that the city of Athens does not employ enough IT staff to add a project like this. This is labor intensive, and we talk about the backups of 3 terabytes of data annually that we'd be adding to a storage system, and so this is different than, say, like the license plate readers, where if the information wasn't used in 30 days, it got kicked out the back end. This is information that is potential evidence that we would have to keep forever. There are evidentiary laws that if we enter evidence in video format on a case, that we may have to keep it forever. And so there are costs associated with that. So again, just working, when you get down in the weeds of this, it's a lot more than just, amortizing $100,000 over 5 years. So I just want council to be fully aware of everything.
And Chief, how many patrol officers are there in Lancaster?
I think they're in the 40s, Mayor.
And we're 20.
And we're 20. I will tell you, I just had a conversation with a Dublin officer, a friend of mine, while I sat here waiting. And they are just now in Dublin, and they have a healthy budget in Dublin, at least compared to Athens, I would say. And they are just now testing the Axon system. They only have 10 cameras to test. They have the same. I've had conversations with Chief von Eckersberg about BWCs, and we all sit in the OACP Legislative Committee and get the regular updates where the legislation's heading, and also the state standards, the Ohio collaborative standards, and that kind of thing. So a lot of this stuff is still up in the air as far as how these records are going to be treated down the road in the future. So.
Thank you. My question was actually asked already, so I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember McGinn.
I was looking at the proposal with the cost and everything. Are you talking about 30 cameras or 15 cameras, whatever? I saw that.
It would be 30 cameras, and the reason that I asked for the quote that way is there's no significant price break after 20 cameras.
Right.
15 cameras does not get our entire patrol division outfitted. Now, I talked at length with the numerous vendors about whether we pooled cameras like we do with radios or whether we had a camera assigned to each individual officer. Now, the cost of cameras are factored into the contract, and the cost of cameras are relatively low. So I didn't feel like the vendors were trying to sell me more cameras when they advocated for each individual officer having a camera. Actually, they told me about the problems that if you try to pool cameras and you run into a situation where you do not have enough for all on-duty staff, then you run into potential issues in the court system where some incidents are recorded and some are not. And then you also run into some concerns with public perspective where some officers were recording at the scene and some officers were not. And they're saying, well, what was on those officers' cameras that they were hiding? Things like that. So they were really advocating, not from I just didn't get the sense that any of them were trying to sell me more cameras. I got the sense that they were telling me these are the problems that other agencies have encountered. So I really like the fact that we're talking about a camera for every officer or potential officer on duty at any given time. I would add to that, that when we have fests, opening weekend, Halloween, and things like that we bring out a huge number of officers, and I would rather they all have cameras and all be recording than just some of them be recording. So that's where it was.
If I could respond to that, and I do have kind of a follow-up question, because I was concerned when I saw the number of cameras that you were advocating. As you probably know, with the Highway State Patrol, they have the cameras in the cars. They often do not use those cameras, do not record the interaction of the suspect taking his tests or whatever. The person will be off to the side, usually under the guise of officer safety, but the point is that there is no requirement that anything be videotaped. I would suggest to you, as a consideration for council as well, and I know we're just in committee meeting at this point in time, that if something like this is submitted for council's approval, that quite a few maybe 5 cameras would be sufficient for a particular trial and system where we could see the benefit, the cost benefit to the community. The other thing, I see no reason whatsoever why cameras should be used on a regular basis for like daytime hours, like traffic stops for the main part. I think that the times that you're really going to need them are probably those weekend evenings or evenings when the Athens officers are put in a confrontational situation. And I really applaud the officers of Athens in dealing with some of those situations, and I think it would be beneficial to everybody. That being said, I do want to, when we talk about cost benefit, because I know Councilwoman Smedley had mentioned that was kind of an issue. I do remember that, a few years back we had an officer that I believe was particularly
I know who you're speaking of.
Yes, reprehensible would be a mild word. I remember during those years when he was a member of the force that I often called some of his actions to the attention of the prosecutors and even the judges. I say this only to illustrate the example that I think in some situations the cameras or recording devices can keep officers who may be fudging, keep them a little more honest, and that's what we all want. Again, I would also emphasize that a lot of times I think that the same thing can be accomplished by a recording device rather than a camera, and I would ask if you have an opportunity to maybe get some quotes on. I know the officers do wear some sort of recording device already, do they not?
No.
Okay, it's just a radio, the response radio?
Some of them carry portable micro recorders,
Right.
USB recorders,
Right.
when they do interviews.
Right.
And they'll pull it out and record an interview. But we also have the video system involved. If I could just respond to
Sure.
your comment about paring down the time that the officers would use it. I wouldn't advocate for that simply because of this. Mm-hmm. The officer-involved shooting that we had earlier this year happened at 7:30 in the morning on a Saturday. And it's not common, but it's not unheard of that we have use of force incident happening at all times of the day. And so I think if we want to capture arrest situations, and it's not uncommon to arrest 2 or 3 shoplifters on day shift at Walmart. It's also not uncommon for those shoplifters to resist arrest and flee. Mm-hmm. You'll see officers chasing people up and down East State Street, mostly shoplifters from Walmart, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I would want those incidents recorded too, because they carry potential. And like I said, I didn't see a huge price break, at least in the storage side of things, which is where the money is involved, quite honestly, between 15 and 20 cameras, or 20 and 30 cameras. And so in this particular quote, I just simply asked them, give me a camera for every person in the department, including investigations who go out and make contacts outside the city. I think we should be recording those contacts as well. And they would tell you that too, because sometimes they get admissions at the front door, and then that gives us 3 extras in case something happens. And also our reserve officers can use those cameras on occasion. So that was just my thought process. Yeah, you could pare it down. Don't know if it would be as effective, though.
Thank you, Chief. Any other last questions? I'm going to interrupt, actually, Councilmember McGee, since this is just an opening dialogue.
I understand that.
And I don't want us to belabor the topic.
I just have one question.
We've already had how many?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Do the cars have cameras on them, and can cameras be put in the cars with a lesser price?
Yes. However, I would not advocate for that, and here's why. We had those systems in the late 90s, early 2000s. Granted, they were VHS tape systems. They were cumbersome. They fell into disrepair, and our budget did not support keeping them in repair. I will tell you that the Sheriff's Department, I think A News article mentioned today that the Sheriff's Department had made the decision to get body cameras. They actually, I think that's inaccurate. They should probably check with the Sheriff's Department, but my last conversation with Sheriff Smith was they chose to do the in-car videos rather than the BWC or the body-worn cameras. I'd actually be just the opposite. It might work for the Sheriff's Office working in rural areas, and the wear and tear on the cameras and stuff might be better in the cars. But for us, we're not in the cars as much as we're on foot dealing with people and out in the community dealing with people, and I just think we get a lot better use out of the BWCs. I'll also tell you that Lancaster uses them in both modes. They have a harness for the Axon camera that you can put in the car, and so you have an in-car video to get traffic information on video, and then when you get out of the car, you can grab the camera and hook it on your magnetic catch, and it becomes a BWC camera at that point. So I think we could have both, really, and the cost would be the same, probably.
Thank you. Thank you. It is an interesting, fascinating topic, and I do appreciate the candidness of the dialogue and the discussion. I think, again, this is a very good starting point, and we're not going to have it all figured out, obviously, this evening. Are there any other questions or comments from either the administration or from council members or the public at large? None from council, administration?
I really appreciate the chief coming here tonight, and for council to really consider. You heard what the chief was saying in terms of the cost. The cost could go well above and beyond the Axum quote, when it comes to potentially additional personnel, but also time away from patrolling, that in terms of downloading the information. I will share as well, in my conversation with the law director, is that one of her other concerns is the possibility that she would have to do upgrades to her own evidence viewing equipment, to be able to watch these. So, and as small or large as that might be, I mean, there's just, if you think about it, there is an unknown level of ripples as this moves forward. But, I mean, a lot to be explored with this, and that's what I tasked the chief with, is to look into this and look at all facets of the body-worn cameras.
Thank you, Mayor. And I also want to thank the chief as well for being here, for having a dialogue with the auditor as well as with our law director. Again, this is a good starting point. I know from my day job, we have security cameras in the building, a plethora of them, and they're invaluable and horrifically important on many levels for the safety and security of our youth and my facility as well as the staff. So I think, again, this is a case where these could potentially both have a major benefit for our personnel and the safety and security of our city employees as well as the public in general. Thank you. If there's no other comments.
Thank you. And thank you, Chief Pyle, for waiting and also taking the time to be with us this evening. Appreciate it. Okay. We'll move on to the Transportation Committee, and that's chaired by Councilmember Pappy.
Well, on a lighter note, hey, Yuba trick or treat. I'm not sure what day we're talking about. I was looking at my calendar, and I have a piece of paper.
October 30th.
October 30th, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. We usually start clearing the streets at 3 p.m. Is what I see here, banning the parking from 3 p.m. on for this activity. As many of you know, this is a Athens city tradition for the Business Association downtown to sponsor this. An ordinance closing a portion of Court Street on Monday, October 30th from 6 to 7:30 for trick-or-treat hosted by the Athens Uptown Business Association. And that is from Carpenter to Union Street. Any comments on that?
Looking forward to it.
Okay, I have one other Halloween announcement I just wanted to make. The Residents Action Council tract at Ohio University always has a Halloween festivities for children. They view it as a safe trick-or-treating experience and festive, and it incorporates the university students with our local children. And this year, that will be starting on East Green at 6 p.m., which is a Monday. They invited all of council, and I let the organizer know we will be in council meeting at that time. But it will begin for the public in the front of the newly renovated Jefferson Hall. So that's just another trick-or-treating opportunity. That's October 23rd.
But does not require street closings.
But does not require street closings or any of those other things, but they did want me to announce it. So if we're ready to move on, we'll look at East State Street project. In terms of the information I've received, I don't have a lot, but I do understand that we need to talk about the bidding. Is that why we're discussing this tonight? And I did have an inquiry from the public. I'm not sure. They must have looked at the agenda, and they were concerned with if there was something going with the bidding and whether or not any changes in plans would happen if the bid didn't occur. So I'm just throwing that out there, and we can discuss all of that. I don't have any other information, so maybe administration can
Certainly.
bring us to
We did do
speed.
the bid opening on the East State Street project. The bid came in at over 22% over. And as council knows, it can be accepted up to 10%, and so this was 12% above and beyond that. And so in talking with the city engineer, he said that, as well as the assistant engineer, that the rebid estimate looks good in moving this forward to rebid.
Bottom line, they feel that we had a tight time constraint in there for paving repairs to be done by November 30th, and we're removing that. But other than that, the engineer's estimate is sound. So it's what we call a thrown bid.
Okay, so a thrown bid, and that was for this year or next year?
That was for this year.
That was for this year. So
Component of it this year. So the rebid will not have that time constraint in there, and they think we'll get good bids. Which does mean 2018 will be pretty busy on East State Street.
As will patchwork on East State Street this year and then next year.
because if you don't have the new pavement, we have to patch again.
We're still going to have to patch, so.
And does this include the sidewalk as well?
That's their option. That'll be in there. They can choose to start it. And it says depending upon who, the apparent low bid will be, they may choose, or it may all be done next year.
Okay.
And that's in the advice of our design engineers, person Brinkerhoff, of course, Salt Lake, who used to work for ODOT. So it's just really informing council that we're going back to rebid. We don't need to seek any additional ordinance or anything.
So as to that question about a change in design,
Nope.
that's not what you're looking at.
No.
You're looking for the rebid.
Correct.
Okay.
No, needless to say, when we opened the bid, we were disappointed. And to come in as an obvious thrown bid, that made it even that much harder to swallow. But.
Council members, Member McGee?
I just didn't quite understand one thing, and I wondered if you could clarify it with the, it's 22% over, you said, and with the rebid that they will not have to have it done in November. Is there any reason to think that the bid will be lower then?
That's indeed what we've been told.
I'm sorry?
That's indeed the understanding.
Okay.
I mean, asphalt plants operate up until a certain time.
Okay.
And this was just pushing that. So basically, nobody could meet that.
Okay.
Based
on.
And that's what happened
Sure,
with Richland Avenue, too. When we initially went out to bid with Richland Avenue, that's why it took a longer period of time, because there was this bidding issue and asphalt and other projects and whatever.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Member Costas?
Yes, thank you. And this is talking to the ODOT project. I've noticed that the on-ramp coming from Columbus down 33 to State Street, that the second left-hand lane has not been opened up yet. Were they waiting for they're waiting for the paving to happen and the striping and everything? Okay.
So it's likely not to be that way until it'll be done in conjunction with our, as you know, they were working in conjunction with us. Same thing for the other ramp.
Okay.
Well, it's the dual lanes. They can't open that until you have dual striped lanes.
Which was the service safety director's earlier comment that it's just going to create, we're going to see a very busy East State Street next year and the interchanges, because what was to be 2017 Phase 1 and 2018 Phase 2, these two phases are likely to not compete. They're going to be occurring within a real tight time frame throughout the summer of next year, 2018.
We're finished?
Thank you.
Okay. We'll stand adjourned at 9:26 p.m. and look forward to seeing you all next Monday, October 2nd.